Hey, this is Aaron.
And this is Kristen.
This is the Drive Mode Show.
Hey, everybody. Today we're going to electrify you with our talk about electrification. What do you think,
Promise
Aaron?
no electric slide jokes.
None.
Except for that one. Anyway, so last week on, I think it was Thursday, President Biden came out and said that the goal for this country is to have 50% of new vehicle sales be electrified by 2030. That's 9 years from now. So the question is, can we actually do that, or is it just political hoo-ha to make everybody feel good, right?
Or a little of both.
Or some of all of the above. So the real question is, can we do it, and what do we have to do it? I think it is actually possible, but it's going to be on a scale of moon landing effort. So it's not going to be, yeah, we can do it. We have to like, as a country, all of us would have to kind of buckle in and make it happen. And to be really frank, Biden is not JFK, and we don't have a NASA to spearhead this. So, right. So this isn't the same scenario at all. So, Kristen, the first question is, by electrified, does he mean hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and batteries, or does he mean batteries only? That's the first thing.
That's my question too, because if it's hybrids and plug-ins, I'm all in for that. I'm interested in hybrids. I think there are some companies that are doing a spectacular job with hybrids. I have not been so interested in the all-electric cars myself for the inconvenience factor.
Mm-hmm. So I think that what he means is cars with a plug. So I don't think he's counting hybrids. I think he's counting plug-in hybrids and EVs, so battery electrics. And the reason I think that is just because that is the general thought process of most people when they think of electric cars. We don't really think of like a Prius or a Highlander hybrid as an electric car. We think of it as a hybrid. We think of that differently. So we're thinking of those more in terms of a gasoline car that happens to have some electrical stuff in it. But if we did include hybrids, then we're well on the way, because I think, if I remember right, the current market share for hybrids is like 12 or 15%. So it's a pretty big chunk of the current market already.
It is. And I think people are interested in saving money at the pump for sure. Mm-hmm. My question is, how much can the electrical grid take? Especially after being here in Texas over February when we had that huge snowstorm, which was so weird, and we lost power for days. So here in Texas, where people are going to be more resistant to EVs as a whole, how's that going to roll out across the country, and can we handle it?
Right. And I use the example of California all the time, where rolling brownouts are almost a regular thing. Like they've just become used to it, because their grid can't handle the amount of load, and that is just air conditioners. That's not even electric cars. So I think of it as our infrastructure, as far as power delivery goes, is wanting. It's going to need a lot of work, which is why one of the reasons I say this is moon landing scale in its in the amount of work required, because we're doing really good as in our efforts churning out car chargers, charging units more and more every year, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of them at this point. So we have lots of car charging, and there's only more of them as time goes. So I don't foresee there being a serious issue for the majority of Americans finding a place to plug their car in the next 9 years, so by 2030. But are those places you can plug your car in going to have electricity to deliver to your car? And if we don't massively change our infrastructure, they're not going to have that. And there are many, many ways we could say that could happen. We could go into all kinds of detail as to what we think or what somebody else might think or whatever. But the point is, it has to happen.
Yes, I think it's definitely going that direction. And full disclosure, I'm married to an oil and gas investor, and his father is an oil and gas geologist. So I've seen things and learned things through being married to him and seeing what life is like in West Texas and kind of how they think about things. And it's very interesting to see how the role of petroleum plays even in electrification. I think people have this idea that electrification is going to wipe out oil and gas. It doesn't really, because you still need oil and gas to run and create a lot of things.
Yeah, you need petroleum to make plastics. You need it to make the lubricants. You need it to make the tires. You need it to make all these things that are on this car are still going to require petroleum. So you're not getting away from it. And in fact, as the cars get more and more electronics heavy, they're only going to have more and more petroleum in them. So that's just a thing. The next step is I'm on the other side of that. Not that, I don't work for a company or something, or as far as I know, have relatives. I do have friends and relatives that work in oil and gas. But I just installed an electric car charger in my garage. And I found out that it is way more complicated than I thought. It costs more than I expected. It was over $2,000 in all.
Wow.
Because you have an electrician, you have the unit you have to buy, you have a specific kind of power you need. I'm going to do a video that we'll have later on the channel that will showcase that because it's more of a process than most people probably assume. Electric vehicles are not just plug and play for the most part. So there is more involved than just that. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is still infrastructure, but this time it's on the supply side for building the cars. Where are we going to get the lithium? Where are we going to get the rare earth metals for the motors? Where are we going to get the things that are required to actually build the car? The only thing that I've seen as a step in that direction is Biden, about 2 months ago, made an announcement that they were working with some other countries, Australia, South America, and other places, to begin importing those raw materials and processing them here. So instead of digging them for them here, bringing them from other places. The issue I see with that is that those places are currently under trade agreements with China, who has a virtual chokehold on this stuff. And I don't see China willingly giving that up. So it's going to be a geopolitical trade war happening for that.
Agreed. And the country of China and the people demand a lot of power. Just the growth in airports alone and seeing how that has affected the power grid there and how they're going to be sharing supplies or not is going to be something that we're going to have to contend with. The other thing that I think that the administration needs to concern itself with is the microchip problem.
Yes.
Because we would like to be chip independent, and they are going to need to put some energy into that on top of everything else.
Even if we're not making them here, we at least need to have more baskets for those eggs. Because right now there's really one.
Right.
Almost all these chips come from the same location. And I think our greatest advantage there is that we have so much technology in this country that's happening in this country that we could leverage that as a way to force the issue to find other supply. But that takes time. It's not going to happen next year. It's going to take a lot of time. Most automakers are assuming that the current constriction on chips is going to happen until at least 2023. So that's 2 years that we're going to have more demand than supply as far as new cars go. So.
Yep, and I think between the chips and what you were talking about with the lithium and other materials like that we need to mine, that is another concern that has to do with the whole reason that people want to go electric, and that is to help the earth, right? But if
Right.
we're mining more materials, then we also have to contend with that.
Yes. And, the reason that Biden is not pushing to mine the stuff here is because, like, lithium in particular, it's a dirty, dirty process. Those are big, ugly, open pit, nasty mines. And rare earth is even more difficult because it's normally just processed as a byproduct of other mining, because it's rare. It's in the name, so
Right.
it's not as so. And then the other thing that I see as a big issue is public perception. We're going to have to sell people, because the big keyword in Biden's whole goal and announcement was sales, and sales implied buyers. And we're going to have to convince half of American car buyers to buy an electric. The electric cars kind of have a PR problem, and that needs to be addressed somehow. And it's going to take a lot of time. And for me, I would say the fastest way to fix the PR problem is to fix the infrastructure problem. Because when people see they can use the cars, they'll buy the cars. But the rest of the PR problems, things like range anxiety, they start on fire, because that's always, sensational news always makes the headlines. They are rich people toys. The tax incentives the government throws money at rich people to buy them. All those things are the negative PR around electric vehicles, and those need to be reversed.
Yes, and here in Texas, they see EVs as a statement. Like,
yes.
Look at me, I'm driving a Prius, or look at me, I'm driving a Tesla. And it's very much becomes like everything else anymore is a political aspect of the perspective.
I've noticed here in Wyoming, when I'm driving around in anything that has large lettering that says, green or plug-in or hybrid or something on it, everybody feels like they're supposed to pass me. They have to be going faster than whatever I'm doing, because clearly my car is not capable of it. So they must be going too slow.
You could take them at the stoplight. Yeah, I wrote an article for The Drive maybe a couple months ago, and it was about the Cobra Jet 1400, the electric race car, and how quiet it is. And I asked the readers, would you go to an event where there's not the sound and smell of fuel? And they're like, no way, man, I'm not going to that.
The kids and I, this coming weekend, we're going to a crash up derby, and I cannot imagine a crash derby happening without the engine smoke and the things going wrong and rattling and random engine parts shooting out because it just exploded. The stuff that happens at those. I can't imagine that without that stuff. It's like going to a monster truck show without earplugs. You're begging to be deaf, and I can't imagine a monster truck show where you're not experiencing that, where it's not heavy metal in your face the whole time.
It's definitely different. It's definitely a change, but it's a change that people are having to reckon with pretty quickly, especially the automakers, and most of them do have a plan. Akio Toyoda said, I think it was last year, earlier this year, he had a lot of skepticism himself about whether the grid could handle it. But I think they kind of have to make a showing. Yes.
Well, as far as agreeing with the president on this particular missive, I guess, I don't know what you'd call this. It's sort of it's an executive order, but it's not actually ordering anything. But because it's a goal, it's not a mandate for anything. So I'll give him a lot of credit for that. I think that for automakers in particular, agreeing with this is nothing but upside. Disagreeing with it is nothing but negatives. So even if they have no plans to follow through, there's no point in saying, no, it's not going to happen. You might as well just go along because, in 3 or 7 years, depending on re-election, it's a different person anyway. That dude's gone, you got another one. And so it's politics are short term. And so But as far as the automakers go, I don't know if you want to go into this, but which ones do you think would suffer the most if we were to actively go towards EVs by 2030? And I think we should go with brands because I know that some companies will do fine, but individual brands in those companies may not.
Well, I can tell you who is going to thrive, so far, and I think Porsche with the Taycan. I think they're doing fine. I think Jeep is dipping their toe in the water with the 4xe, but that's not an electric Jeep, but it runs really well and it has impressive torque. So it's also going to depend on the culture. For instance, the Jeep buyers, are they interested in electric Jeeps? And that's why there's so many different kinds of Wranglers.
Right.
I'm trying to think who else is really doing a good job. I mean, I think VW is sticking their toe in the water too.
Yeah, I think every brand in the Volkswagen group is doing well because Volkswagen as a whole has really gone all in. They kind of had to because they have to get past Dieselgate, and the way to do that was dump everything into the opposite. And they seem to be doing really well with it because all their brands are doing something. So the one I feel the worst for, I think, is Dodge because Dodge has kind of gone the other direction. They're all in on bigger and bigger displacement and more power. And that might be okay if Dodge is held as a halo brand for, muscle car and sports car enthusiasts. If Dodge goes to that, which it very much appears that's what they're doing, then
I think they're already there.
I think they would be fine. Yeah, I think more people understand Dodge as a muscle name than they do SRT. So I kind of see SRT slowing down or going back to just racing, and Dodge being the performance brand. I see the V6 engine as being going the way of the dodo with this. So if any of the companies that are very heavily invested in V6s and haven't done turbocharged 4s are probably going to suffer because of that. But I think every company seems to have seen the writing on the wall. I think the only one left now with that is Toyota, and they're very quickly changing gears on it. So I think they've also seen it coming. So the days of the 3.5 through 6 are kind of going. Yeah, because you can replace those with a regular hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, a regular 4, a turbo 4, and you can get away with that. Which means the mainstream sellers of the Mustang model are probably going to disappear. Ford has very clearly made moves with the Mach-E that it's very, very clear to me that Ford is turning Mustang into a brand. I think Mustang is going to be a performance name for Ford, not just one car. And I think that's really smart because Chevy with the Camaro, they haven't figured out what they want to do with it. It's clearly going away, but much predict 2 or 3 years it'll come right back. They're just going to redo it. It's going to be something else. And I think it's going to be a fully electric sports car so that they don't have to make the Corvette fully electric. Because I think the Corvette is always going to appeal to people that have an engine happening. So even with their hybrid version, they're going to have an engine. Whereas the Camaro, I think if they let it sit for a couple of years and then brought it back as an EV, they could totally get away with that and do what Ford is doing with Mustang. Kind of my thoughts.
I'd like them. Yeah, well, I think the automakers' goals will change as the generations change because when this generation who grew up on 50s cars and 60s cars, after they've passed away, the next generation is going to be into 70s, 80s, 90s cars more. That's really coming up. So who and when are they going to be ready for change?
Right. It's the same sea change we're seeing with why is Harley Davidson floundering? Why are they going? Why are they dying off? It's because their market is dying. If you go to the Sturgis, which is going to happen here, I think next week, go up to Sturgis and just look at the crowd and count the number of people who aren't being paid to be there that are under the age of 40. And there aren't many. The average age at that rally, I guarantee, is over the age of 50. And that's because that's who loves Harley Davidson and the brand. The new generation coming after them, not so much. You don't see people under 30 wearing the Harley Davidson gear very much, because it's just not. It's not in their culture, and so that's the reason that Harley Davidson is having such a hard time finding buyers, and coincidentally, why Harley Davidson has gone so heavily towards electrics. So there you go. They've got.
Yep, and I think Generation Y is big. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, Harley's got several electric models coming out. That's a sea change there.
It's true. And the Generation Y is the next target market. The automakers understand that Generation Y is the one with the buying power coming up. And so they're going to be addressing that. So for those of us who are not Generation Y, it's going to be an adjustment, but we have to roll with it. We can't stay where we are. It doesn't work that way.
It's going to be similar to us watching our parents adjust to the internet. The jokes started happening because they couldn't even program a VCR. How are they going to do email? That kind of stuff. It's going to be the same thing. You can't even, we're going to be making jokes about, like, you can't even change a tire. How do you think you're going to, whatever with your EV? And they're just looking at us going, what, you pumped gas?
You whippersnappers. I have to stick up for my parents though, because they're pretty internet savvy.
Yeah.
My mom's probably on more than I am. That's saying a lot.
And that was another point that I was thinking of when I was thinking about the adoption of EVs, and that is that the new generation of buyers and the current buyers on the market are not buying vehicles that are being electrified right now. The top 5 selling vehicles in the country, 3 of them are pickup trucks. Then they got the RAV4 and the CR-V. The RAV4 Prime is the only one of those that has a plug-in or a fully electric version right now that you can go buy. And when you do buy it, you're only going to get it in certain markets, and there's going to be a huge dealer markup for it.
A good one.
Ford's Lightning is going to be a game changer partly because they were smart enough to go after commercial sales with that truck. So I think that broadens their appeal a lot. But I will be amazed if the Lightning makes up 20% of the F-Series total sales. That would be mind-blowing to me. I don't see it being that big. When GM comes out with their electric truck, which they've promised in the next year or so, same difference. I will be amazed if it's more than 10 or 15%, probably like 10% as their take rate on that. And that's nowhere near the 50% we're going to need. As far as mid-size and family-sized two-row SUVs, all the concentration thus far has been on compacts, but compacts are such a tiny portion of the overall market, because Generation Y is pretty soon going to be having kids, and they're going to want that bigger and bigger vehicle. That's evolution. That's how our automotive buying evolves through time. My first car was totally horrendous to somebody like me now, where I would be like, I could never, when I had kids, I had a Honda Civic, and that thing went out the door immediately.
Oh, wow.
Because, take a car seat in there and sit in it, right? It's not going to work. So, yeah, those things, we have to start thinking about that. Are we going to be able to electrify the CR-Vs and RAV4s? Are we going to be able to electrify a large enough portion of the pickup trucks that is, or are we going to be able to change people's minds away from those as vehicles to buy? Neither of those I see as realistic at the 50% mark in the next 9 years. Not without, again, moon landing levels of effort for this.
Right. So it'll be interesting to watch, because as you say, as the political climate changes, it could change. And also, if the automakers can't get the buyers to get interested in them in the next 9 years to that level, they'll have to adjust. The
Right.
expectations will have to adjust, and that's probably part of why it's not a mandate. They're pushing it, but they're going to have to adjust and adjust the marker as they go.
So I think if it had been made a mandate, I think there would have been protest from the automakers instead of, sure, go along with it. Because a mandate, I think everybody in the business knows, a requirement for all electrics by 2030 would, first off, it would kill any efforts at changing the PR of electric vehicles. Because we learned in the last year or so with COVID, the dumbest thing you can do to get people in America to go along is try to force it on them, because they will go the opposite. You can't force things on.
Freedoms.
Yeah, we don't work that way. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I think that the president was smart enough not to try to make it a mandate. Because I know that there was a lot of pressure on him to do that, to follow the way of Europe and go with that. And clearly that's not realistic.
Yeah, and to be clear, for anybody who's watching, like, this is not a political endorsement.
Yeah.
But, I think credit where credit is due is valid. And, analyzing this for the automotive industry is key to seeing what it's going to do next and what we think is going to happen.
Because, it's just, to be completely honest, I don't like anybody who gets elected president. So, because my assumption is when you get elected to office, you've automatically done something wrong. But, there are places where some people do need credit. But anyway, see, now we did talk about politics. We might as well make the electric slide joke.
No hating comments. This is all about the electrification, and we're speculating, but I think it will be interesting, and I think our viewpoint is definitely colored by what we like. I love internal combustion engines. I love the sounds and smells of them. I'm not attracted to EVs at all, but for people who are, they're really excited. So let's see what happens when we kick the can down the road a little bit.
Mm-hmm. See, and I'm happy both ways. I like both kinds of vehicles. I've greatly enjoyed the electrics that I've driven, but I just like driving. So as long as I get to drive, the vehicle becomes...
As long as the car's not driving for me, it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. Totally with you.
All right. So that's what we got. This has been Aaron.
This has been Kristen.
This is the Drive Mode Show.
Thanks for watching.